So I have covered paycheck protection forgiveness ad nauseum. Every single question I can think of regarding forgiveness, I have addressed in some video or another, except for one. One question just popped in my mind that I have not seen addressed anywhere, and I was obsessed until I found a suitable answer to this, and here I am. That question is, what happens if you apply for PPP forgiveness and you're declined, or maybe you didn't receive the full amount of forgiveness that you think you're eligible for? You know, maybe you received 80% forgiveness, you think you should have got 100% forgiveness. What can you do in this situation? Is it as simple as sending in some more documentation, asking for a reconsideration? Is there some further appeal process? Well, I have the answer here, and it's a bit of a process depending on the exact situation you're in. Now, I don't want to freak anyone out who has yet to apply for PPP forgiveness, because if you're one, a legitimate business, and two, you spend your PPP funds on eligible expenses, you'll be fine. You should be totally fine. I have already personally received PPP loan forgiveness on my first draw loans from 2020. All I had to do was fill out that form 3508S, apply through my lender. One loan I got forgiveness in like 5 days. The other loan I got forgiveness in like 2 weeks. No questions asked, didn't have to submit any documents to my lender, and I was good to go. And I'm not the only person who has received forgiveness here, because I happen to know all the tiny little granular details about this program. There's already been hundreds of billions of dollars worth of loans completely forgiven already as of the recording of this. So I don't want to freak anyone out. I just want to enlighten you on what happens if you happen to not receive loan forgiveness. So in order to explain this, I built a good old flow chart. I spent a couple hours putting this together, a couple hours researching, but I figured this would be the best way to highlight everything you need to understand about this. And this is on PPP forgiveness. We're going to call it PPP appeal. That's terrible. I'm not even a dad, and that's a terrible dad joke. But anyways, let's talk about the first and foremost of the typical paycheck protection forgiveness process on a typical day. Typical forgiveness. Anyways, first off, you get your loan. Step one. Step two, you spend it correctly. You can spend that on payroll, which is the largest expense, the expense that most people are going to spend their loan on. You have to spend at least 60% of your PPP loan on payroll, but you can spend it 100% and get the whole thing forgiven. So if you don't have any employees, it's very simple. You simply just pay yourself, which basically means the money is in your bank account and you can certify, yep, check the box, I have paid myself. Other eligible expenses include mortgage interest. Now, you can't include mortgage principal. It's only interest. Rent for your business. Now, there's some gray area here as to what rent, if you use a room in your house as an office. You're going to have to ask your accountant on that. But rent is an eligible expense for PPP loan forgiveness. If you have an actual brick and mortar office, then yes, of course, that is included. The gray areas, if it's your house, if it's also part of your mortgage, things like that. Utilities, again, it's the same thing as rent. If it's utilities at like a business space, easy to consider that as an eligible expense. If it's at your house, that's where there's a bit of gray area. And again, that's where you may want to ask your accountant if it's worth even asking them. Again, if you don't have any employees, it's much easier just to attribute everything to payroll. Next, operation expenditures, which is basically any software, any business software is eligible under that. Next, supplier costs, which is your day-to-day supply costs. You can think of it that way. Next is property damage. Most people won't be able to use this as an eligible expense, but it's property damage that wasn't covered by insurance that was caused due to looting and issues during riots or the pandemic. So it doesn't cover a whole lot of people. And then finally, worker protection, which is just any safeguard against COVID, plexiglass walls, masks, things like that. So you spend it on eligible expenses. You wait for your covered period to end. So most people who received their PPP loan in 2021 have not seen the end of their covered period yet, because that has a minimum of 8 weeks. If you have seen the end of your covered period, your lender may not have even reached out at this point to let you apply for forgiveness. Most lenders in 2021 have not even opened up the portal yet for forgiveness. That is not a concern. There's not any reason to worry, because you actually have 10 months until after your covered period to apply for forgiveness. So the loans I was talking about where I received full PPP forgiveness, I actually got those loans in May of 2020, and I just had them forgiven a couple weeks back. So that gives you an idea of how much time you have with this program, but your lender will reach out once it's time to apply for forgiveness. And then you ask to be forgiven, not in a confessional, but instead you use the form 3508S. That's for most people. Most people will use that form. That is for loans under $150,000. If your loan is over $150,000, you'll use this form 3508EZ. So that is loans over $150,000 and you didn't see a reduction in payroll of 25% or more. But again, most people use that 3508S, which doesn't even require any documentation as of right now. And then you're forgiven and you get to move on with your life. You are good to go. Okay, moving on from here. But what if you are not forgiven? If you're not forgiven, there's a process, but it's not simple. So let's break this down. That's why I felt the need to make a flow chart. Plus, I also could just kind of like making flow charts if we're being completely honest. So here's how it works. The SBA and the OHA, which is the Office of Hearings and Appeals, allows you to appeal the decision for forgiveness. But again, it's a hassle. So first, you'll want to try and negotiate with your lender. Most issues should be resolvable through your lender if you just go ahead and contact them. If for whatever reason they read a document wrong or you provided the wrong document or something like that, you should be able to contact your lender and get it fixed on the lender basis. Try and do that because trust me, this process is difficult if it doesn't work with the lender. So if you've tried, it doesn't work with the lender, you do have some recourse. You kind of have two different steps with recourse here. So if you're still stuck, you can request a review at the SBA. If and only if you hit one of these criteria, you are given 0% loan forgiveness. So you applied at your lender and then your lender said you're not getting any forgiveness, then you can request that at the SBA, or if your loan was over $2 million. And I believe if your loan was over $2 million, the SBA automatically reviews all of those loans. So you have to hit one of those criteria in order to have the SBA review your request. In order to do that, you can contact SBA's appeals office at olitservice@sba.gov. Feel free to screenshot that or whatever you need to do in order to keep that in your records to file the appeal through the SBA. You'll just send an email there. Now, what if the SBA denies you? There's still recourse beyond this. This is where the OHA comes in. So you can appeal the SBA's decision through the OHA if the SBA says one of the following. First, if they happen to say you weren't eligible for the PPP in the first place, you can appeal that. If they say you weren't eligible for the amount that you received, you can appeal that. If they say you used the PPP on unauthorized expenses and you have some kind of proof otherwise, you can appeal that. Fourth, and this should actually say if you aren't eligible for the forgiveness amount your lender determined, you can appeal that through the OHA. And then fifth, you aren't eligible for any forgiveness per your lender's decision, if the SBA determines that per your lender's decision. So if you hit one of those criteria, if the SBA had one of these determinations, then you can appeal through the OHA and it must be done within 30 days of the SBA's decision. And how do you do that? How to start the process? First off, you need to gather a bunch of documents. So there's documents that you need. First, you need some kind of reasoning for your appeal and evidence that you're appealing on time within the 30 days. Second, you need a copy of the SBA's decision, what exactly they told you, why you were denied. Third, you need to express your goal. How much forgiveness are you trying to get? Are you trying to get 100% forgiveness? Are you trying to get 50%? Whatever your goal is. Fourth, why you think the SBA is incorrect in their decision. Fifth, sign copies of basically any documentation you have. Sign payroll reporting, wage reporting, tax filings, or any other information that proves eligible expenses or proves your case. You'll want to provide that. Six, your loan information for your PPP loan. And then seven, you or your lawyer's contact information. Oh, I should have put an apostrophe there. And it might not be a bad idea to get a lawyer if it comes down to this, because this is where it gets pretty technical. And really, I think this is going to be mostly an issue for large loans, people with tons of employees, people with more complex situations. If you don't have employees, it's very, very unlikely that it comes down to this situation, but I still think it's important to understand how this process works. And then you mail all those documents to this address. Again, you can feel free to screenshot this if you want this for your records. And then it gets sent to a judge who will determine a ruling within 45 days, and they'll either approve or deny your request. And then you have 10 days after the ruling to request a reconsideration. So like I said, it is quite the process in order to go through this whole appeal situation For most people, you really don't have to worry about this, but it's important to understand how it works. Again, if you're a legitimate business who spends your PPP loan on eligible expenses, you should not worry. It should be okay. Your lender will reach out to you in due time. You have plenty of time to get loan forgiveness. You have 10 months until after your covered period. So I hope that this was helpful. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the darn channel if you haven't already. Let me know if you just subscribed and you've already watched multiple videos in the past. Subscribe to the channel, check out the description for various offers like free stocks, free crypto, other cool things down there. And I would just like to thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.